We have had team members experience missing time. We've had team members experience extreme disorientation.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm talking David Pilates missing 411 disorientation. And that person was me. So, that was me growing up. So, I was kind of like this weird little maladaptive sponge in the 70s, just soaking all this stuff up. I loved it. I love a mystery. I love a mystery. And, the good side of that is the industrial might of the United States. You were deployed, and I was a DA civilian with a logistics unit in Afghanistan. And the one thing the U.S. does the best is to get the most stuff there the quickest. But, we would do stuff like, I remember we were working one case where this woman was having, very strange experiences while she would go to bed. Things would visit her and all of that. And we started our investigation. And we found out that right on the outside of her house was a power meter. It was a very old one, like from the 60s. And you start looking at folklore, and there's a crap load, and I don't know what kind of language I can use on this podcast, but there is a bunch of stuff out there, that is very remote, very inaccessible at times, but very rich in folkloric history. They said trees that were there before, when they got set up, weren't there now. And the newer member, she said it was like the upside down in Stranger Things. Things were wrong. It felt wrong. She said, I don't feel like I'm myself.
Yeah, so I came across your work on Facebook, Trey, and we became Facebook friends. I don't know. We've been trying to friend people who are into the same sort of things we are with our channel, and that's when I was like, hey, this guy's got an interesting background, and I really like what he's working on. So.
Now, was that my professional Facebook page as a male exotic dancer? Is that what? No, I'm kidding. I'm joking.
No, but we can plug that for you.
You don't. No, you don't want to see me dance. That's for sure. Yeah, absolutely. Sounds great.
Yeah, and so we're excited to have you on the show, Mike and Dave's Multiverse. We've got former military veteran, former DOD civil servant, paranormal investigator, author, and now movie producer, Mr. Trey Hudson. Welcome to Multiverse, man.
Yeah, happy to be here. I am not the producer of the film. I am just in the film, but it's a film about the Meadow Project. So, I don't want my producer to say, you're taking mine. But happy to be here. Like I told you before, we started recording, is I'm an average guy. I had kind of an average life growing up. I just have had these, a ordinary guy, encountering extraordinary circumstances and situations. So, I'm just happy to share them. And hopefully, at best, people will be enlightened. At worst, maybe they'll just be merely entertained. But either way is a win.
Very cool. And
often held the same opinion. I would rather be entertained in pursuit of the truth, only to find out later that, okay, you're fiction from the beginning. Who cares about that?
Yeah, that's it. It doesn't matter either way. I'm like I tell people, other folks that are in this business, and I can name some names you would recognize. None of us we don't get rich doing this. You would be surprised at the people you see on TV that actually have day jobs when they're not filming because they have to make a living. Mm-hmm. So, I'm out there, sharing our story, and our discoveries, our revelations. And, my attitude is always people can take from it what they wish. or nothing. It's just I'm just happy to be here. I'm literally living the dream. I'm doing what I want to do. I retired from the government, and I tell people that was my J, my lowercase j, my job. This is my vocation. This is what I really love doing.
Very cool. And so let's just start there. So you're from the South, you're from the Atlanta area. What was life like growing up for Trey? And then what made you join the military, and kind of lead us through that?
Yeah, it's I was a child of the 70s. I turned 60 last year. So, I was born in the early 1960s. And I kind of came aware of this stuff in the 1970s. There were some just fantastic opportunities for a young kid to explore this stuff in the 70s, usually through media, television and film. A great example is Leonard Nimoy's
In Search of.
In Search of. I am such a geek. I have that entire series of Leonard Nimoy on DVD.
Awesome.
And then there was another series, which was fiction, which was called Kolchak the Night Stalker, starring Gavin McLeod. Just escaped me. But anyway, it was a kind of a paranormal. It was actually the TV show that gave Chris Carter the idea for the X-Files. And so, I watched that every week. My parents would punish me by not letting me watch that on Friday nights. And once again, showing my geek credentials, I have that on DVD. And then there was another show on CBS called Project UFO, which was a kind of a bastardization of Project Blue Book, highly fictionalized accounts of some of the Blue Book cases. And once again, guess what? I have that on DVD. Then there were some really great films that came out. One was kind of a fake documentary called Sasquatch, The Legend of Bigfoot. I don't have that on DVD, but I do have bought it digitally. So, I get kudos there. And of course, who can forget the seminal 1977 film, Close Encounters of the Third Kind, one of my favorite films. It was probably one of the first big films to really look at the whole UAP UFO phenomena in a very serious, mature, and adult way. But Spielberg, in his unique Spielberg way, made it very human. Made it very approachable for people. It was such a serious film that J. Allen Hynek was actually in the film. He has a cameo in it. So that was me growing up. So I was kind of like this weird little maladaptive sponge in the 70s, just soaking all this stuff up. I loved it. I love a mystery. I love a mystery. Who doesn't?
Sure.
And so I get older. I was in a Boy Scouts, as a young guy. I got Eagle Scout, got the 50 miler foot afloat award 3 times, did Philmont, just did, really heavy stuff into scouting. So I learned and cultivated a very rich love of the outdoors, and not only a love of the outdoors, but a very strong confidence in the outdoors. Graduated high school from Norcross High School up in Northeast Metro Atlanta, and attended the University of West Georgia. Now, the cool thing about the University of West Georgia is the program I was in, which was their psychology program, has what they call a transpersonal and humanistic focus. Transpersonal is the growth of human beings in a transpersonal way to transcend and becoming something more, basically spiritual transcendence, religious transcendence, things, meditative transcendence, things like that. Humanistic is very much focuses on the human experience. And we were lucky enough to have on faculty there some really big names, in that psychology business. One was Mike Ahrens, who was a student of Abraham Maslow, the famous psychologist. And we also had Dr. William Roll, Bill Roll, the very famous parapsychologist, was there. And then we would have Dr. Raymond Moody, the one that started the life after death stuff with his book Life After Life, would come over and be a guest lecturer. So we had all. And I am proud to say that I have been a guest lecturer back at West Georgia. So
cool.
That was a kind of the environment that I was cultivated in. So it's very, very rich, a very solid credentials, in this kind of stuff. Formally studying at University of West Georgia, ended up getting my BA in psychology with a minor in anthropology. from that university. And I was an ROTC and was branched as a U.S. Army intelligence officer when I graduated college. I was in the U.S. Army Reserves. I went off to the U.S. Army's Military Intelligence School for 6 months at Fort Huachuca there in Sierra Vista, Arizona. Came back, went into a reserve unit called the 372nd Military Intelligence Detachment, and then I went over into something called the 337th Tactical Exploitation Battalion. Both were counterintelligence units. So I unfortunately got injured and ended my military career. I'm a 100% disabled vet. And so I'm like, I still want to serve. That's always was my goal. So I went into civil service as a U.S. Army civil servant, kind of doing the same thing. And, did a stint in Afghanistan as an anti-terrorism and operations officer. And I retired as the chief of intelligence and security at one of our Department of Defense's organic industrial facilities, the OIB, and organic industrial bases, which are like big mega factories that DOD has that builds and repairs things. They're like, they're like an automotive factory for, tanks and airplanes and stuff like that. So I retired as chief of intelligence out of one of those facilities. And now, I'm just really doing what I want to do, which is, be a weird crapologist. If it's weird stuff, that's where I want to be. So that's kind of Trey Hudson in a nutshell.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that. And we're eager to hear more about the vocation. And that was a really good summary of all the job elements.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I did have a handful of questions about the bio. What injury was it that took you out? Like a knee, back, usually knee or back, right?
It was, I wish I could say it was something really cool. Like, I was fast roping out of a helicopter and
Right.
Landed wrong or got blown up. I was lifting weights at Fort Huachuca. And basically what I was doing is we had 2 racks of weights with cables and I was working my pecs, and I, wasn't watching form and I kind of twisted and blew out a disc and it just got progressively worse. It just, I got thrown into the Army medical care and, it's not the best in the world.
No.
And then into the VA and it just got progressively worse until, the nerve damage is done and it affects other bodily systems, and it's just one of those things. So, what I do is I try to stay active. I try to stay positive, and I try not to let it slow me down.
Yeah, I can actually relate to that. I was in the Army as well, but I didn't injure myself. I did, but not what took me out. I injured myself lifting weights as well, a back injury in 2018.
Yeah.
And it's progressively gotten worse. And now I'm having, all kinds of, all the stuff that you probably know goes along with that. So I'm learning how to live with it right now too. So I can totally, I get it.
Well, thank you for your service. And you could probably understand the hydrate, take Motrin, drive on. And, you've got a bulging disc. You're on profile for a week. Here's some Motrin.
Yeah.
And, after a week, you're back. They expect you back at 100%, which is not the way you recover from a back injury. So,
yeah, I actually did a whole deployment with a broken hand. That was the first
one.
Yeah. So it's the army culture, right? It's suck it up and drive on.
Yeah, they break a lot of guys and gals that way. A lot of folks are out there broken because of that. So, but thank you for your service. I do appreciate it.
You too. I will say VA's care has gotten better over the years, though. I'm being able to use all kinds of services outside of the VA, like through the community care program. That's been really helpful and that kind of thing. So,
matter of fact, the rugged visage you see here is from my dermatologist working on my face, which was a community care referral. So,
got it.
Yeah. So it's better than it was.
So Mike has some experience working in a giant factory. I wonder how that compares to like what you were doing. Mike was working in a paper factory, but he took me over there one time, and I was like, Jesus, I didn't realize these manufacturing factories were so gigantic.
Yeah. The place I worked at repaired I'm not going to go into detail, but it repaired a very major piece of military thing, something very major. If I named it, you would immediately recognize what it was. And so when I retired, the chief of staff of that installation set up a tour for my family. Like, it was just like very intimate, and took them into the heavy industrial area where they take this big piece of equipment completely down to its component parts, refurb it, put it all back together, and it comes out, factory new. And everybody that goes through that, says, "Oh my God, you have one building that is 5 acres under a roof, one building, and then you have all these other ancillary buildings that feed into it." And, kind of like you said, your experience with Mike's Paper Factory, people just have no idea the scale. And, the good side of that is the industrial might of the United States. You were deployed, and I was a DA civilian with a logistics unit in Afghanistan. And the one thing the U.S. does the best is to get the most stuff there the quickest. We can move tons of material and personnel, and that's one thing that the U.S. Army does better than anyone else in the world. And when you get to see, a military industrial facility, that's really impressive. And also, the industrial might of the U.S. civilian sector is really impressive too, because they quite frankly, fed into our war effort, both in Afghanistan and Iraq.
Yeah. It's I can't even imagine what that the military factory looks like, because I was like literally blown away by where Mike used to work. I was like, what the hell? But I'm one of these people who walks around thinking everything just shows up at the grocery store or the whatever. Just most people, unless you work in manufacturing. Elon Musk himself says manufacturing is the hardest thing to do that there is to do. So.
Yeah, it is. Well, manufacturing and logistics, getting items, where they need to be. Yeah, and after we get done recording, I'll tell you where this is, and you can look it up and see the magnitude of the facility where I work. It just, whenever I would go over in the industrial area, I was continuously, just blown away by the enormity of it.
So, I wanted to ask, as we get into the paranormal stuff, did you have a paranormal experience before you before you got into your current project? Have you ever had a paranormal experience?
I did right before I went to Afghanistan. So this was probably like in about 2007, 2008. I did join a local paranormal group. Now, if you remember back in the mid 2000s, the paranormal craze was really big. You had your shows like Ghost Hunter, I can't remember some of the other shows, but you had all these Ghost Adventures. So I joined a group that was affiliated with TAPS, the Ghost Hunter people. And so we did, a lot of paranormal investigations. So, this sounds rather, kind of rote now, but common, but, we had basic ghost stuff. We had disembodied voices, apparitions, stuff moving on its own, that whole, smorgasbord of, strange experiences. So, but, was there anything that really specifically got me as a young kid? No, I was just always a really curious kid. I was that kid that asked questions, that, eventually became, a annoyance. It's like, shut up, quit asking questions. That was me. And, the stranger it was, my friends and I, when we would talk about, Bigfoot hunting, we wanted to be like, little Bigfoot hunter guys. And so, I was always interested in it. And then when I got into it a little bit more formally, then when the bona fide experiences started happening.
So, what percent of cases in those early days how would it work with that group? People would contact them and say, "Hey, I'm having these experiences. Can you come take a look at it?" How many times were you able to debunk it easily and say, "Well, sorry, you need to fix this or that in your house"?
What I tell people is, paranormal investigation or even high strangeness research is, probably 90% sitting on your butt and nothing going on. That's just, and then of that 90%, probably the remaining 5% is explainable stuff, and then maybe you have another 3 to 5% that is truly anomalous. But we would do stuff like I remember we were working one case where this woman was having very strange experiences while she would go to bed. Things would visit her and all of that, and we started our investigation, and we found out that right on the outside of her house was a power meter, it was a very old one, like from the 60s. And so we took our tri-field, and this thing was spewing out a lot of milligauss of electromagnetic radiation. And it turns out inside of her house, her bed, the head of her bed was just on the other side of that power meter. So what she was having is something called electromagnetic hypersensitivity,
Yep.
which can cause hallucinations, headaches, a out of body experience. And I said, hey, move your bed, and things will be solved. And we've also had, a lot of cases of like hypnopompic dreaming, sleep paralysis. So we always try to debunk stuff. And then some of the stranger stuff that we had, of course, in the Meadow, where ASOG, has been doing a lot of research. We've tried to debunk a lot of that. Some of it we do, and some of it we don't. So it's hit or miss. Sometimes, what I like about this business is when you think things are calm and nothing's going to happen, either A, something crazy happens that you weren't expecting, or B, a brand new phenomena comes out of left field that, puts your jaw on the floor. So, it keeps you always guessing.
That's an interesting case with the power meter. Hopefully the power company maybe check the installation on that. So this it's kind of
that was
magnetic.
And that's something that you go to a lot of these places, especially like industrial facilities, be they like a commercial business or a restaurant or something like that, is we'd go around and start measuring electromagnetic leakage from electrical equipment. And it's a lot more severe than people think. And most people do not have electromagnetic hypersensitivity, but those that do, it can really, really affect them.
Mm-hmm. Maybe that's what they do to the beds at the Monroe Society. When you go to the Monroe Institute, they put a little field going through the metal beds. That way everybody gets on the same brainwave.
Yeah. Actually, we've one of our team members is a alumni of the Monroe Institute. Yeah, we actually have a psychotherapist on our team.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Very cool. So before we get into the Meadow and the ASOG and stuff like that, when you were working with, is it TAPS? Okay. What's the acronym stand for?
The Atlantic Paranormal Society.
Got it. Yeah. And
yeah,
I guess what I wanted to ask was getting in. So did you ever spend any time at any like sort of famous places that were famous for being like, there's always the old hotels or hospitals, old hospitals, decommissioned hospitals, things like that?
Yeah, back in the early days, before those places started realizing this was a big money-making deal. We've investigated places like Waverly Hill Sanatorium, Sloss Furnace in Birmingham, Alabama, the Sorrel Weed House in Savannah, are just three of the big ones that we've investigated. And then, unfortunately, what happened is two things. Is number one, these places realized they could start making money charging, groups to investigate. And then number two, they started requiring a ridiculous amount of insurance and a bond. You had to have like insurance and $1 million bond before they would even let you come into these places. And it's like, something that a lot of people don't realize is a lot of these research groups out there that are out there doing really, really, good cutting edge research are self-funded. I have a thermal that's $4,000 that came out of my pocket. Nobody funded that. I don't have a Brandon Fugel, writing me a check. And, so it started to really cut smaller groups out of the, out of it. And, one thing I've never done is I've never created any of my groups as a not-for-profit because there are certain limitations on what you can and can't do as a not-for-profit. So, being a not-for-profit, we couldn't solicit tax-free, donations and things like that. So, really started to limit some of the stuff. So the people that do get into these really good places are your ones that are usually backed by like big production companies like Ghost Adventures and, some of these other guys. They actually have the horsepower and the money to get into these places like Estes Park and places like that. And so it's so you kind of have to get out there and shake the proverbial branch and make your own acorns fall from the tree. And that's kind of what happened with the Meadow. Is back in the 2000s with OPS, the group that I started with, Oxford Paranormal Society. We started to see a decrease in referrals from TAPS and other places. Basically, the craze was starting to kind of fizzle out, And so I'm like, I'm going to start going out and finding my own places. But being an outdoorsy guy, I'm like not entirely sold on the idea of every haunted place has to be a building, a graveyard, or, why can't it be something, very remote, and you start looking at folklore, and there's a crap load, and I don't know what kind of language I can use on this podcast, but, there is a bunch of stuff out there, that is very remote, very inaccessible at times, but very rich in folkloric history. And so I started looking at that, and we started off looking at a haunted road in this very remote area, in the region where the Meadow is. And nothing happened on the haunted road. It was one of those stories like, the ghost would come out and, the locals would say, don't go down there. Them haints will get you if you're out there at night, those kind of places. And it's like, okay, you tell me not to go down a haunted road. Where do you think I'm going? I'm going down that road, And so the haints didn't get me. But back at base camp, we had one of our base camp operators had an amazing UFO encounter. Really cool UFO encounter. And so it's like, I forget that haunted road crap. Maybe we got stuff going on here. So probably about half a mile, 3/4 of a mile from our base camp was a big open field, a meadow. And it's like, hey, let's kind of look at that area for several reasons. The area has this region is known for UFO, Bigfoot, and ghost folklore. So there's a lot of stuff going on in this region. So it's like in this big open area, we can, number one, for cryptid, it's a natural track trap. Anything that runs across it is going to leave some kind of track line that we can follow or record or maybe cast, something like that. Number two, being a big open area at night, we can put teams on the periphery of it. It's about 8 acres with night vision and thermal, and anything that moves across it, we can pick up, hopefully by multiple teams. Number three is to the south of it is a tall ridge. We can put teams up on that can look down or flush things down into the meadow where that data can be captured by the teams on the ground. And lastly, but not leastly, is it has a big expanse of open sky. So we can do a sky watch, UFO, CE5, stuff like that. So it just so happens this area was something we wanted to look at, and that's what eventually became the Meadow Project, is the high strangeness that happened to that very that tight geographic location, but also kind of in a larger region about 5 or 6 miles out from there.
And when did you guys first get wind of the Meadow, like the ghost, like the ghost road or whatever, and like what kind of time frame are we looking at?
Yeah, the ghost road was probably back in about 20. Let's see, maybe about 2015. Actually, what the ghost road is, I thought it was a cool story, and I put a geocache out there, because I just thought it'd be fun to go out there and find a geocache on a haunted road. And so eventually, I couldn't get anybody to go with me. Nobody wanted to go out in the woods and be cold and stuff. So, some of the members of the original Oxford Paranormal Society weren't interested in that because it wasn't a house or a factory or something. It was actually, outside, and you'd have to, lug your own gear and all of that. And so I reached out to a friend of mine who was the well-known Sasquatch researcher, cryptid researcher, Bob Grumpy Wilson, who was on the TV show Bigfoot is Real. And he agreed to go out to this area of the haunted road with myself and one of his research partners. And so that's kind of, that was kind of the nucleus of ASOG right there. And, when we started encountering the extreme high strangeness in about 2017, I think it was July of 2016. I'm sorry, July of 2016. We realized that the traditional ghost hunting and cryptid hunting protocols just were not sufficient enough, because this stuff was really, really strange. And quite frankly, it can be quite dangerous. We just had a really ugly event happen just last Saturday, with another team and another investigation. So that's kind of how ASOG was built, is a group of individuals from backgrounds like emergency medicine, military, fire services, law enforcement, people that are used to crazy situations, following orders, staying on protocol, and completing the mission.
Emergency medicine, I see that's a subtle nod that Dr. Stephen Greer may be involved himself. He's famously a trauma doctor.
Yeah, no, Dr. Greer, Dr. Greer is not involved, but we do have other trauma people. And, you know, a nod back to Dave in the military is when we go out is generate a 5-paragraph operations order before every operation. So everybody knows exactly what is going to happen. And we run it kind of like a military operation. You have a tactical commander there in the field, and then you have an operational commander that's over the whole expedition. And we have, instead of like fire teams, we have research teams, and then you have an overarching, like a squad that goes out and then disperses their teams. And we set up LPOPs, listening post, observation post. And we run it like that because not that we're militaristic, but that model works. You know, that command and control model really is effective. You know, we have radio comms, we have a net control officer and all of that stuff. So, you know, that's one thing I think that sets us apart a little bit, maybe than some other research groups, is we really are really protocol and operations driven. And that way, you know, we can really try to quantify results by knowing where everybody is, what equipment they have, where exactly specifically they were when they experienced it. You know, they're not moving off station without permission. So you're not contaminating other people's research areas, things like that.
It necessarily means you're adhering to all the scientific rigor that it would take to eventually publish any of those results, or at least index them and compare.
Right. You know what I tell people, I'm not a scientist, I'm an analyst. You know, when I was went to Intel school, you know, I was trained partially to be an analyst. So that's how I look at things. I look at signatures, I look at indicators. You know, I'm not looking at scientific proofs because, you know, quite frankly, I think this stuff is maybe a little bit more abstract than that. And that's why, you know, using the scientific methodology, scientific method has been woefully anemic, you know, in addressing some of these high strangeness events and situations and objects and things like that.
Yeah, the first time I came across this phrase "extreme high strangeness" was through looking into your work. Where did you guys coin that, or where did that come from?
You know, no, we didn't coin it. Actually, it might be from John Keel. I would have to look up to see where that phrase actually came from. But you know, it's a really good phrase because you know what I've discovered is you have to take a multiple disciplinarian approach with this stuff. Is you can't go into an area and say, okay, I'm just, you know, I've got my blinders on, and I, you know, I talk about this when I lecture. If you go in like with the blinders of a cryptid investigator, you know, you see an orb over here and you go, well, that's an orb. You know, I'm a Bigfoot investigator. I have to ignore that. You know, or if you're a UFO guy and you hear, you know, like a large bipedal, oh no, that's that Bigfoot guys look at that. But no, look at all of it, because what I believe is they're all facets of the same diamond. They're just different elements of the same thing. And you can get into a multidimensional model where you can have different aspects, very, very different, very removed from one another. It seems like they wouldn't even be related, but they're all aspects of the same multidimensional experience, object, or item, or being, for that effect.
Yeah.
So what we do is when we go out is we'll take like best practices from the Bigfoot community. You know, we'll go out there and we'll do tree knocks and howls and, you know, all that. But we also do things from the paranormal world, as we bring in like the Estes method. We bring in the God helmet, you know, things like that. We also bring things in from the metaphysical world. Our parapsychologist has a very transpersonal psychological practice. So he brings in things like hypnosis, you know, hypnotic regression, meditation, guided meditation, visions, things like that. So we really try to approach this stuff from a very much of a multidisciplinary aspect. And quite frankly, I think our results speak for themselves. And we try not to pigeonhole ourselves into any one genre of research or investigations.
I think that holistic approach is important because these things, by their nature, are at the very edge of our perceptive capabilities, and what, even to where some people can perceive it and other people can't. And some people might be perceiving illusions because it's on the edge of what we can even begin to interpret. So the well-rounded approach is the only way to fully.
Yeah, I think so. And more people, you know, more researchers starting to kind of look at that. I remember I went to a Bigfoot conference back in 2013, and I had a T-shirt on that said, you know, Oxford Paranormal Society. And a lot of the Bigfoot guys were kind of like, you know, what's that paranormal guy doing at a Bigfoot conference? But in private, I'd have these Bigfoot guys come over to me and say, hey, yeah, I don't want anyone to see me talking to you, but I had this experience, and it wasn't Bigfoot. It was something else that happened while we were looking for Bigfoot. And so I think more people are open to that now. I'm hearing more and more, big name researchers starting to take a multidisciplinarian, type of approach to this. And I think that's a lot healthier for everybody.
Yeah, and I liked how you said that they were, I forget the phrase you used, but they're all the same side of the same coin or whatever. What was the phrase you used?
Yeah, multifacets of the same diamond.
Yeah.
Different facets of the same diamond.
Yeah, and I think more and more people are becoming open to that idea during this slow drip modern UFO disclosure we're getting. Is like a lot of people are more and more open to the idea that we're dealing with interdimensional stuff, and like Mike said, on the periphery of our perception.
Mm-hmm.
And that's fascinating. I did look that up. It was the OG himself, Dr. J. Allen Hynek.
Strangeness.
Coined that term, and I just noticed you guys were using it, and it makes sense to describe what you guys are looking into, because Hynek uses it to specific high strangeness to describe UFO cases with multiple bizarre inexplicable elements to divide conventional explanation,
right? Which
to me goes beyond even just here's a UFO hovering.
Right.
There's multiple things happening, and so I think it's cool when you guys go out and do a mission. So kind of describe to me, so you have different teams. Does each team have a different objective, or are you all looking at the same objective? Or
well, sometimes yes, sometimes no. It just depends on what the mission profile is. Like sometimes we'll go out and we'll have experimental packages we'll put out there. We'll do an experimental package where we'll have a stopwatch that runs as a control back in base camp, and we'll set out a stopwatch in the meadow to see if there's a time differential. Mm-hmm. That might be one mission profile. Another mission profile is we have it's a pyramid. Imagine a four-sided pyramid, like the pyramid at Cheops. In the base of it has different compartments, and then we'll take different items, like small avatars, like a little avatar of the Sphinx, a toy car, and they're in numbered slots. And we'll lay that into the meadow, anchor it to the ground. We put a pyramid top over it, cover over it, lock it, and then leave it for 24, 48 hours, then come back and see if anything's changed. So that's another experimental package we can put out there. Most of the time, what we do that seemed to work the best for us is we will go and put a number of teams in the periphery of the meadow. And, we'll have a map we lay out before we ever leave camp, and we'll set up our teams, team 1, team 2, blah, blah, blah. Here's your loadout. Team 1 will have, directional microphone, thermal, and night vision. Team 2 will have, thermal, regular recorder, not directional, and thermal. And, team such and such may have a different equipment loadout, or they might have the same loadout, just depending on what, the operational commander wants. And then we will put them on station. Everybody knows exactly on the map where they're supposed to go. This is your location, your location, your location, your location. You are not allowed to move off of location without the permission of the tactical commander. That way, if somebody picks up an object on thermal, where the other teams are. Everybody's not just wandering around willy-nilly. And we all have radio comms. We'll radio to the tactical commander and net control. Hey, this is team 1. I'm requesting permission to move to, the northeast corner, next to the old log with the rock next to it. Okay, all teams do acknowledge that team 1 is moving. Yes, okay, team 1, you have permission to move. Let us know when you're on station, and then they may move. And then as the situation develops, we may shift teams around, as needed. Then we have net control back at base camp with a logbook or a log sheet, and they're logging all of this, for forensic analysis later on. And they also provide not so much command and control, but also a kind of a backstop. If we have some additional people in camp, they can provide a QRF. Unfortunately, not ASOG, this other group, we had to actually activate QRFs, quick reaction forces, to go extract a team from a very bad situation with this other group that I'm a member of. So, we try to look at things like that. I think that model works. It's just like, it's not a bunch of guys from the trailer park with their cell phone cameras and a cheap digital recorder running around in the woods at night. We try to have some discipline. And that's something that a lot of people that, come out and do guest research with, they go, you guys are really disciplined, and you're very, very serious about this. And so, when we do collect, data, and I'm not even going to say evidence, that's kind of a loaded word, but when we collect data, odds are it's probably not contaminated by, fellow team members. We try to keep it as pristine as possible.
I have a couple of questions regarding radio comm. First, obviously, I understand the utility when you have multiple units of being able to keep track of who is where, but that leads to an element of detectability. If you were trying to go in strictly as sort of silent observers, do you ever choose to go in as a smaller unit and stay off radio completely?
That's a good question, and I see the logic of that. However, we have had team members experience missing time. We've had team members experience extreme disorientation. Like I'm talking David Paulides missing 411 disorientation, and that person was me. And if we had not had our protocols, which say nobody goes by themselves, you always have comms, not only with other teams in the field, but back to base camp. We always have an exfil plan, and we always know where we're at. And, quite frankly, as the team lead, I would never send a team out without comms. I think that's dangerous, and that's just, as far as electromagnetic contamination of the site, that's just a vulnerability I'm willing to accept.
Yeah, that sounds like it comes from your military background too, right? As like safety first, protocol, that kind of thing.
Yeah. I mean, it is, and it's not like, I'm not saying we're a militaristic group. We're not.
No.
But that model really works. And there's a reason it works, because it works. And it's. Sorry, go on.
The other side to that question: have you ever inadvertently picked up information with the radio comm system that wasn't communicating regarding your location? Have you ever picked up anything strange that becomes logged as data for the mission?
Yes. We had a this is actually a weird case, and let me look at my notes right back. This was in this was in June of 2020. We had left a team member back at base camp. Like I said, we always try to leave someone back at base camp. He had radio comms back with the group, and then the rest of us had gone out there. And as you mentioned, Dr. Greer, we were doing a CE5 protocol. And that particular comms from this base camp, which this was during COVID, so we couldn't use our regular base camp. It was closed. So we used dispersed camping. We didn't have direct line of sight comms, UHF comms. So we had to use a ham radio repeater, and a lot of us are ham radio operators, so we could, use the repeater. So we were having to bounce, like send a signal 40 miles down, hit the repeater, you come 20 miles back, try to get over some of this terrain, these terrain features. So anyway, we had gotten done with our CE5 protocol, and we were coming back, and I got on the radio and I gave the call sign of the base station. I said, blah, 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 this is blah, 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 we're returning to camp. And in the middle of that conversation, a woman's voice came in, broke into our conversation, and said, and I'd have to go back and read the transcript, but it was like it gave base camp's call sign twice and then stopped. Now, in ham radio etiquette, you don't break into a conversation, and you always identify your station. You always give your call sign. So that was kind of an anomalous thing that came over the radio. And we never could figure out what that was, because the woman's voice was not anybody on our team. They basically broke FCC laws by not identifying themselves, using a public ham radio frequency, amateur radio frequency. And they were rude as hell, by breaking into our conversation. So that's about the only thing as far as radio comms, that's kind of happened. That was weird. Now that we had other weird stuff happen that night, but not, but on radio, that was about it.
Interesting. I wanted to ask about, if you could, if you're willing, the most recent high strange event that was on Saturday. Could you detail that a little bit for
Yeah,
us?
yeah,
Or-
I can. And, let me be clear. This is another group.
Okay.
This is not ASOG. This is another group. Now we have, imagine ASOG kind of being very elite, very dialed in, very dedicated people. This other group is sort of used as a feeder, like the let's say the second ID, second infantry division. Maybe some of those guys are using that as a feeder in special forces. Is people feed it from one unit into a more elite unit. I don't mean elite, but I mean a more specialized. That's a better word, specialized unit. So anyway, this other group is primarily a cryptid research group. And so it's like very broad. People that are just getting into the business, can come into this group. So what we had done is we had taken, had gone to a location in Georgia, and we've had cryptid stuff there before. And one of the team members was brand new. She was just brand spanking new, this was her first time out. And she was teamed up with a guy that's also a member of ASOG. And is a member of this other group. So he's a very experienced researcher. He's a former Marine, combat Marine, 23 years in law enforcement, retired, really dialed in guy. So we put those two out in this location in this area, and we call it Ambush Alley because you always hear sounds and things as you go through this area. And so we're sitting there, and we had kind of the same models. We had different teams set up, around this area where, these cryptid sightings have happened. And everybody was about a quarter of a mile from each other. And so, we're sitting there. My team, was sitting there, and I had a kind of a newer member with me. And he comes on the radio, and we'll just call him Pete. Pete comes on the radio and says, "We have multiple phenomena going on around us." And it's like, cool, that's what we're here for. So, we're kind of excited. So everybody kind of perked their ears up, and I drop my nods, and I'm looking around my area, and my partner has the thermal out, so we're really kind of amped up a little bit because stuff is happening within a quarter mile of our respective locations. So then his comm started getting kind of garbled. He's just you catch up little fragments of hey, team blah blah, this is team blah blah blah, real garbled. So like comms are starting to be compromised, which is not uncommon. This area does not lend itself to line of sight communications very well.
Okay.
Then came the disturbing thing is he said, all teams, this is Team Pete. I don't know what's happening. And the tactical commander came on and said, "Stay put. Do not move. We are vectoring to you right now." So all the teams packed up, and we did like a forced road march. I mean, like hoofing it to get to them as fast as we could. Unfortunately, my team was the furthest. And so we got there the last, but the other two teams were there by the time we got there. Pete was on the verge of tears. And what they described happened is they were sitting there, and they started feeling odd. And then they said this fog came in and created it was almost like a wall. And the cool thing is you have two individuals that really don't know each other that well recounting the exact same experience and story. So that adds a degree of credibility to it. So this wall of fog set up, and they said it felt like their little location of the forest had been isolated, like it was like cut out, like a cookie cutter had cut it out. And it was different than when they went into it. They said trees that were there before when they got set up weren't there now. And the newer member, she said it was like the upside down in Stranger Things. Things were wrong. It felt wrong. She said, "I don't feel like I'm myself. I feel like I'm going to fade away." And actually they grabbed and held hands because they honestly thought that one of them wasn't going to be there anymore. And they were concerned if they were ever going to get back. And so it was one of those things that was not only physically unnerving, it was existentially unnerving. And they felt like they were weightless. like their body had no mass. So we finally got there. Made sure, kind of in true Army fashion, everybody hydrate. So, made sure everybody got something to drink because, dehydration can make you kind of wonky. And started doing a field interview. Turned on recorders, did a field interview. And their experiences were almost exactly alike. And they were talking about how this thing would phase, it would pulse. This high strangeness would pulse and then retreat, pulse and then retreat. And, we got them back to base camp. And everybody was still shook up to the point that the newer female member actually broke down into hysterics. Once the adrenaline came up, and then once the adrenaline kind of dropped down, her emotions opened up. And so that was not the Meadow, but several members of the Meadow Project were present. So I've been reaching out. I've got to reach out to some big names in the Bigfoot world. I'm not primarily a Bigfoot guy, but there's a phenomena called zapping or infrasound that some people believe that Bigfoot does. But I don't think infrasound can explain this rich lattice work of high strangeness that they experienced. I know how the military did some work with infrasound for non-lethal, and that kind of strange hallucinations and all just doesn't quite completely lend itself to the infrasound hypothesis. So what I'm wondering, and we've had this happen before, and this, I think, it might be, they might go into it in this upcoming film, is that this phenomena follows you.
Right.
Like since I've been researching in the Meadow, about a year and a half ago, behind my house, like 40 yards from where I'm sitting right now, I found canine tracks that were 6 inches in diameter. That's a canine track that big.
Dog man.
People that had that's exactly where I'm headed, because people that had done work with Robert Bigelow under the National Institute of Discovery Science, NIDS, at Skinwalker Ranch. I'm trying to remember not Ashcroft, I'm trying to remember one of the scientists, but he actually went back to Virginia and had dogmen appear in his backyard. You go to Marley Woods, you have dogmen. You go to Skinwalker Ranch, you have dogmen. So something about these upright bipedal canines. And now I'm having that phenomena happen behind my house. So there's something about this phenomena that follows you home. There's a hitchhiker phenomena. So, this just happened on Saturday. So we're working on the hypothesis. Some of us are, is this a residual from the Meadow, the high strangeness at the Meadow, that is following us to wherever we're at? Is it something unique to that geographical location in Georgia, or is it something unique to the experiencers? So, we're still working on those hypotheses now. So I still have some research to do. But that's all in a day's work, But one thing I do have to tell people is, if you get into this business, and I'm talking about seriously get into it, it's dangerous. We've had team members die that aren't with us anymore. People that work with NIDS out at Skinwalker Ranch had health effects. Part of the team out there now, with Brandon Fugel, have had serious health effects. So, people just need to take that into account if they want to get into this business.
I want to clarify.
And go ahead, Mike. You go.
So, sorry for those two witnesses, like you said, the presence may be following. You said they felt that as a presence that was sort of shifting around, and it wasn't like a portal or a spot in that particular spot in the forest, but that spot had been occupied, and that's how it happened.
Yeah, it was kind of like, at that particular place in Georgia, it was like they were sitting there and this fog surrounded them, and it was like a regular fog, and then it coalesced into like a wall. And it's like they were in like their own little world. And they said that in their own little world inside of that wall of fog, the environment was different than the environment that they had originally entered. Like trees were different, the sky was different. They said that the coloring was different. Like things had a different color to them, a different texture. So it's almost like when you have in quantum physics, where you can have two stages of reality existing at the same time, like Schrodinger's cat. The cat is both alive and dead at the same time. Okay, light is both a particle and a wave using the dual slit experiment. This is almost like a macro quantum effect, where you had two realities existing at the same time. The reality that they walked into the normal forest, and this reality that they were actually somewhere else. Now that coincides almost exactly with some of the phenomena that we've had in the Meadow, of having these dual realities existing at the same time, where people will enter into something and it's different on the inside of this, and then then they come back out into the normal environment, and then everything changes back to the way it was.
Yep.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
I wanted to just mention Skinwalker Ranch, and that that's the place, the most famous place of high strangeness, because it's not a UFO hotspot, it's not a Bigfoot or cryptid hotspot, it's not an orb or no dimensional portal, different things like that.
Right.
It's all of that stuff together.
Right.
And that's why you guys are calling this place, the Meadow, the Skinwalker Ranch of the South, right?
Right. And the guy that literally wrote the book on Skinwalker Ranch, Ryan Skinner, he actually says that he thinks the Meadow gives Skinwalker Ranch a run for its money in high strangeness.
Very cool. I think, and you had mentioned the movie. I think it's a good time to play the trailer.
Yeah, please.
So let's go ahead and play the trailer for the audience. If you wouldn't mind, while I'm getting this set up, who's producing and making this movie for us?
It is coming through Merkle Media, and it was actually created by Dark Holler Studios, which is Ward Heine's outfit. So yeah, real happy. It's under the Merkle Media banner, but I'm really happy with it. I think it's going to be fantastic.
All right, let's check it out.
This place is very special, extremely special. It ranks very high on the list of extreme high strange.
There was all kinds of different phenomena that his team had documented at the Meadow.
I mean, stuff was popping off at the freaking camp.
We knew of all the stories that we had heard them tell over multiple podcasts for the last few years.
I'm not sure what I just saw, but Bob just turned into a ball of light.
Something grabbed my legs and was pulling me out of bed. The only way I could describe it was like Gollum.
Shadow people everywhere.
The anticipation part started ramping up.
We are big fans of putting ourselves in environments to see how it unfolds around us.
What was that?
Okay, I got that on camera.
Saw something, like real strange.
I was starting to let myself believe.
We were getting too close to the truth.
Let's freaking go.
All right.
Wow, very cool.
Welcome to the Meadow. It's weird.
Yeah, lots to unpack there, because talking about shadow people, talking about so what I mean, for you personally, Trey, what is the most bizarre thing you've seen there?
The most bizarre thing I saw, and the film really goes into this, and I will tell people that you're going to see some things in that film that have not been released publicly outside of my lectures. Okay. So this is like the world premiere of some of this really weird stuff.
Okay.
The weirdest is what we call the portal. And the portal is a label, so I don't want people to get too hung up on the word portal. Portal is basically something that allows you to transcend or traverse into another situation. Okay, I'll just put it like that. Is in 2017, February 2017, we were doing our research there in the Meadow, and team I was on was up on top of the ridge that I mentioned earlier, up to the south of the Meadow, and one of my team members said, "That's weird. There's a box down there, a power box, like you've seen them on the side of the road. They're the big green cubes, where you have power interfaces or comms or whatever." And he's looking at this through his thermal, and it was jet black, meaning it was colder than the surroundings. And he says, "Trey, look at it through your thermal." So I bring my thermal up, and I'm like, "Dude, all I see is a herd of deer." So he brings his thermal back up, and now what he saw was a box is now a herd of deer. And we all have our confirmation bias. We want things to be normal. So whenever we are encountered with high strangeness, our first reaction is to rationalize it. So he's like, "Okay, maybe I just looked at it wrong." So we worked ourselves down into the meadow. Our idea was we were going to traverse from east to west, get to the west end of the ridge, drop down into the meadow, and work our way back across, connecting with all the teams as we made our way across. And we started getting radio contact that one of the teams was also seeing these boxes and cubes in the meadow. Now, something I forgot to mention is right after we saw the deer, another team member looked through his thermal. We have this on video. Is he saw a man-sized heat signature. Now, I'm not going to say man-shaped. I'm going to say man-sized, about 6 foot tall. 1.75 meters tall, maybe 0.75 meters wide. So man-sized. But the weird thing about this heat signature is it started off small, it got big, got small, got big, got small, got big, and then split into two and then disappeared. And it's like, okay, that's weird. Don't know what to make of it. But we had these two heat signatures down there. Did not correspond with like I said, nobody moves off station until they're given permission. This did not coincide with the location of any known teams. This becomes important later on. So we drop down in the meadow. We're getting radio comms that this other team is also seeing these boxes or cubes in the meadow. One will appear on thermal, not with the naked eye, not with white light, only on thermal, disappear, appear, disappear, and said, hey, you need to come over there and meet with us and try to figure out what this is. So we made it over to this other team, and I basically had everybody come together to create one big super team. And, about 12 people, so about a squad size, group. And they said, hey, there was one right there in front, and it's starting to dissipate. And by the time they got their thermal hitting recorded, it pretty much dissipated. And you could just barely see the outline of it, very faint. And I said, well, let's dispatch a team into it, into the area where it was and see if the environment is different. So the team goes to this area, and this is on thermal, so this is filmed. And as they get to the periphery of it, they disappear. Their heat signatures are gone. Now, this is in February. In a mountainous area. So there's no vegetation. They said when they got into the area where this thing had been, it was colder. It was very dark. It was very quiet. And when they went in, there were no brambles or brush or anything impeding their access to it. They were in there for about 90 seconds. They turned around and came out. When they came out, things that were not there before now impeded their exit, their egress. They were stumbling over branches and briars and things that weren't there before. So they went in 180 degrees unimpeded, turned around, came out 180 degrees, and now they have, they're having to fight through the brush and stuff. We went back several years later during the same time of year to the same location, and during the daylight hours, filmed both in visible light and thermal, a team walking that same route. Their thermal signatures were never obscured completely. We always had visibility on at least a part of their thermal signature. And you usually never had one person completely obscured. Very, very, very rarely did you have all of one person obscured when you had multiple people. That was actually analyzed by the Discovery Channel back last August. It was featured on one of their TV shows, that video. And the only thing they could come up with is inconclusive. I've also had MUFON review that footage, and they came up using quantum analysis and some other things with some other entities that were not visible except under quantum analysis. And they look like what looks like an oval-shaped cigar thing sitting in the meadow that was not visible to the naked eye or on our thermal until they put it through the quantum analysis process. While that was being filmed, the operator pans her camera over to the right and she says, who or what is that? And in a small copse of trees about 40 yards away, there are two upright heat signatures watching us as we film this. And that is probably the most, the most extreme things that we've experienced out in the meadow. And that is the famous boxer cube video that people associate with this project.
Are we able to see that at somewhere?
Yeah, that'll be in the film.
Oh, okay, great, awesome, yeah. And when does the film come out?
It comes out the 27th of July as the world premiere.
Okay.
And if you go to if you type in the Meadow Project 2025, you'll find the trailer, and in the description of the trailer, there's a link for tickets to that premiere, and there's also going to be a live Q&A afterwards with myself, Joel Thomas, Tony Merkel, myself, and Ward Heine, the director.
And you're doing that here in Georgia? Mike and I are in Georgia, by the way.
Oh, okay. Yeah, no, it's a virtual premiere.
Okay.
Yeah, so everybody will get to experience that at the same time. What part of Georgia?
I live in Cumming, so very close to where you.
Oh yeah.
In Norcross.
Yeah, yeah.
And then Mike lives in Columbus.
Columbus. Okay, yeah, know them both very well.
Yeah, so I'm pretty excited about the movie, and it comes out in like 12 days or something.
Yeah, yeah, it's creeping up on us pretty quick. I'm really excited about it. You know what I've always told people is the Meadow Project. You know, it's not my story. You know, that's why I wrote 2 books about it. You know, it's not my story. It's the world's story. The only thing that I don't disclose is the location, because I don't want the site to be contaminated. You know, I'm kind of a butthole about that, but we've got an OPSEC plan, and we're very, very particular about the information that gets out. But other than that, you know, it's free game. And that's what I told, Tony Merkel and, his researchers, and of course the director, Ward Heine. I said, it's your experience. You come out here and do your film. This is your moment, and take away what y'all experience and tell the world, because I don't own your experience. It's yours. So, I often have guest researchers. I don't know if you're familiar with the researcher Katie Page, who has been on Beyond Skinwalker Ranch, and is affiliated with the famous Clearview Ranch in Colorado, which is a very strange story.
I was watching a little bit of her on another show, on another channel, because it was linked on you posted it on Facebook. So I need to look more into her, but yeah.
Yeah, she's been a guest researcher at the Meadow several times and has had her own very strange experiences.
Yeah. So talking about operational security, how do you vet these people? Because I understand the need to keep this site uncontaminated, because as soon as it gets out, you're going to have TikTokers and YouTube content creators up the wazoo going out there, going camping and getting goofy. And so how do you know, when you're bringing somebody out there that they're going to do?
Usually they're seasoned researchers. They're people that have been in the business for a while, and I review their work to make sure they're serious. If it's somebody that has a podcast and going out and doing scare things like, it's a branch, and they run off and then joke about it, after having beers at the campfire, nothing wrong with that, but that's not for this project. And before anybody even considers going out, and if you looked at the people that I have signatures on NDAs, there are some big names that have signed these NDAs.
Okay, I was going to ask about NDAs.
Is what they do is, if you want to know the location or come on an investigation or research outing with us, an expedition, is I'll send you the OPSEC plan, the Operation Security Plan, so you can look and see this is how we protect our information. And if you're okay with this level of protection, sign the NDA. You sign the NDA, then I send you what is called the CIL, or Critical Information List. Now, you can tell I was an intel geek. Right. I send you the Critical Information List, which outlines the specific information that we're protecting, and what we're willing to disclose and what we're not willing to disclose. And everybody agrees to that. And basically the understanding is, if you willfully break that NDA, I will do my best to destroy you in the community.
Yeah, I get the necessity for that. I was just kind of thinking, Mike and I are in the vicinity, blindfold us, drive us in there, right?
Well, the thing is, you don't know if you're in the vicinity. What I tell people is it is south of the Mason-Dixon line and east of Arizona.
Okay.
It is somewhere in the south.
Okay.
It could be as far as Arkansas. It could be Virginia, Louisiana. You just don't know. And I keep that. I'm not to be a butthole, but there's a reason I do that. It kind of like what Mike was saying is, as soon as it gets out, it's like, poor old Dwayne Ollinger, bless his heart, I had a conversation with him one time, and he said, once the location of Blind Frog Ranch got out, he has all kinds of trouble. And, he talks about people, coming on and, digging holes and prospecting. I've been to Blind Frog Ranch, and it's like, where did this pit come from? And like, hey, somebody came in here, over the off season and dug this, this mine, And so I'm like, this is on public land, so I can't control access to this, and the good news is you can't have somebody come in and buy this land and deny me access to it. So it is public land, but being public land is, if the location ever gets out, kind of like the Uwharrie National Forest, and specifically places like Yates Place, which is a campground there in Uwharrie. Once Yates Place, which was very active in with Sasquatch, activity. Once the term Yates Place, Uwharrie National Forest got out on one of the Bigfoot shows, it was ruined. I mean, I tried to go out there and do some research with some guys I know in the Carolinas, and it was a joke. I mean, you had everybody running around, these kids out there knocking on trees, and, we're out there trying to really do serious research. And it's like, is that a legitimate tree knock, or is that some kid with a baseball bat? Mm-hmm. What's that thermal signature I just saw? Oh, wait, it had a Coors Light in its hand, so it's probably human, So, that's what I'm trying to avoid. And in doing that, I hope people, at most, I hope they respect that. At least I hope they accept it.
I get it. You'll be overrun by TikTokers by next week if you put that out. You put that out there. I wanted to ask about just your thoughts, since you're a guy who's been into this sort of thing since you were a kid in the 70s. I was also introduced to cryptids like Bigfoot and Loch Ness Monster and stuff through Leonard Nimoy. And even though I'm 43, they were playing those repeats for 20 years.
Oh, right? Yeah, so, they're great. They're fantastic.
Yeah, they are great. I actually wish I could still watch them. But what is your take on modern UFO disclosure and what's going on with the New York Times and Lou Elizondo, David Grush, Chris Mellon, that whole thing?
That is a tough one. There are a lot of aspects to look at that. And like I told you, my background in the military was counterintelligence. Mm-hmm. Part of counterintelligence is something called deception management. Mm-hmm. Okay. Mm-hmm. And that is a way of, and I may or may not have ever been involved in special access programs. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And there are ways to divert attention away from certain elements of special programs. And sometimes that's done by either creating a alternate truth or letting a alternate truth be created organically and allow that truth to get legs and run, because it distracts people away from what's really going on. And I'll give you an example of that. Let's say a private Snuffy or specialist Snuffy is out at, Fort Benning, and he sees a Humvee, and underneath this Humvee are a bunch of coils, like electrical coils. And Private Snuffy gets on the internet, he does a lot of reading, and he starts reading about anti-gravitational technology. And he says on Facebook, hey, I think they're doing hovering Humvees. I saw one at Fort Benning, driving down, the back trails. So Private Specialist Snuffy just found a special access program, and he figured it out because he's a smart guy. So what would happen is you would have a guy like a security specialist who might be, running that program, or, security of program at that level. Those are called government special access, GSSO special access officers. And a counterintelligence agent would bring Specialist Snuffy into an office with no windows and say, Specialist Snuffy, you saw something. In the interest of national security, we're going to administer something called an inadvertent disclosure oath. And we need you to sign this and never talk about this again. So the lid has been put on Specialist Snuffy. He's pushed out the door. So now he's got that inadvertent disclosure agreement. He's out the door. Now, how to deal with what's out there on Facebook. So the program security office, the PSO, in coordination with counterintelligence, will generate a story and feed it to the media that says, Fort Benning has just now released the information that they're releasing. They're working on mine countermeasure kits for the underside of Humvees that send out an electromagnetic field to neutralize IEDs and mines. So now everybody's like, oh, that Snuffy's an idiot. That's actually a counter anti-mine feature. So they create a truth and divert away from what's to protect the critical security and essential security of that program. Being a former DoD security specialist, I get it. I understand why that's done. Now, to answer your question, the UFO world, disclosure, some things you have to do is consider the source. And you've had people like Richard Doty go out there and say, hey, I was that guy that created these stories to distract people away from classified airframes and let people run with the whole UFO narrative, because basically it kind of delegitimized what people saw, which most likely were classified airframes, F-117, B-2, and a lot of other stuff DARPA's working on that we don't even know about. So you've got that aspect of it. And then you have people that come out and they disclose stuff. Now, if you're involved in a special access program, there's something you've signed, and I don't know what you guys were involved with or what your clearances were in the military, but when you get up into highly compartmented stuff, you sign something called a DD Form 2836, which is a special access program indoctrination agreement, and basically it's an additional non-disclosure agreement up and above collateral, secret, top secret, and confidential. So people that come out and say, oh, I'm going to spill the beans now about this special program, blah, blah, blah. How do you get around your DD 2836? People have been put in prison for disclosing classified information. There's an Army, former Army, I think Lieutenant Colonel, that is being prosecuted, I think next week, is going to do a plea agreement for disclosing classified information. So how do you get around that? And so, I always look at that stuff with a bit of suspicion. Now, David Grouch is an interesting critter. Okay. In the special compartmentalized information world, there's water cooler talk, especially if you have what's called a co-utilization of a special access facility, where you have different special access programs working inside of the same SAP facility. Or if you're involved in straight intelligence, it's about the same thing as a SCIF, Special Compartment Information Facility, except this is special access. So people hear things, and you can start putting the puzzle pieces together. And the way Grouch did it, which I thought was really smart, is number one, is the thing that he discloses is a program he was never read into. He was never formally read into this program. So he has not violated his 2836. You can't prosecute someone for disclosing something when you never told them not to disclose it. So, this is just, rumors he heard. Number two is he went to the, every SAPF, Special Access Facility, has a number next to the door that says, if you expect special or fraud, waste, and abuse in the special access programs, call this number. And it's a number direct to the DOD-IG, Department of Defense Inspector General's Office, DOD-IGO. And he said, hey, I think that there's a special access program that is being run outside of congressional knowledge and approval. Now, even the most sensitive special access programs, which are called waived programs, waived special access, do have knowledge of certain members of Congress. So there is a very tiny bit of congressional oversight. So he was concerned that there was fraud, waste, and abuse in this program. So now he has top cover as a whistleblower from the Department of Defense Office of the Inspector General. So now he's got top cover. He's not disclosing anything he's formally been read into. Now he has top cover that he's reporting a potential fraud, waste, and abuse. So then he discloses what he thinks. I think that there's a program that is involved with the recovery of, extraterrestrial biologics, extraterrestrial craft. There are programs out there that not only retrieve this stuff, but do analysis and R&D on it. And before he spoke to Congress, he went to his security manager and said, I am going to talk to Congress in this unclassified format. Will you approve this release? Now, the security manager might not have been read into the program either. So he or she reads it and says, I don't have any knowledge that any of this stuff is classified. I can't crosswalk it against a security classification guide. So yeah, talk about whatever you want. My first book was run through my security manager, for release. And he's like, yeah, as far as I know, nothing's classified in there, which there isn't anything classified in there. But if you don't know what's classified because you're not read into the program, you're not going to say don't release it because it's classified, because you're ignorant. You don't know. So Grouch went through that very methodically. Very, very methodically. So if I was going to do that, release something, that's how I would do it. So in my mind, that lends a degree of credibility to what he believes he knows. Now, does he have the whole picture? Maybe not. I know there was a program that I was might or might not have been read into that, I saw certain indicators of this program over the years, and I formulated an idea using analysis of what I thought it was. And when I was finally read into it, I told the read-on authority, I said, well, before you read me on, let me tell you what I think it is and see if I'm right. I'm just that guy. And it turns out I was way off base. All the indicators were there, but they pointed in something totally different. So, it could be that Grouch, saw something and he thinks, that's what this is, and when in fact, maybe it's not.
Which could even be by design.
It could be by design. I mean, it's like even, in some of the media appearances and stuff, I'll throw red herrings out there on the location of the meadow, so people, they really, they don't know where it's at. They really don't. And it's kind of like during Operation Desert Storm, when Norman Schwarzkopf was briefing, the media on the stage next to him, as he had a map of Iraq, and with the technical unit symbols showing offshore units, like we're getting ready for an amphibious invasion. And he never referenced that map set. So Saddam Hussein's intel guy said, yeah, they're going to do an invasion because we know that these ships are offshore. We know they have this many Marines. And now they have the the drawings on this map. That's where they're going to come in amphibiously. So they shifted a lot of their forces, and that's not how they came in. They came in through Kuwait, or they came in through Saudi Arabia. I'm sorry, into Kuwait. So it's misdirection.
Yeah, and that kind of brings us back full circle to the poster behind both of us, because that's sort of the plot of the X-Files, right? Kind of this pop culture's been telling us that this is what they do for a long time. There's the useful idiot that Mulder was, so to speak, on and then there's misdirection, and there's disclosure agreements, and there's fake stories that get put out there, and it's just that nowadays there's so much. It seems like every other week, or even every weekly, there's like something that could be part of the psyop too, right? Yeah,
it is like Jake Barber's egg video. The egg, with the. Yeah. It's like, I don't know. He's lifting a egg-shaped object.
Yeah.
We were a bit let down by that one. We covered it live, if I remember right, but then I never followed up and watched the full 1 or 2 hour Jake Barber specials after that. But because if they were gonna, what they should have shown in the premiere should have been the amazing stuff.
Yeah,
we were quite underwhelmed.
Yeah, so it's like the Kecksburg UFO thing of the acorn falling. If you go back and you look at some of the, I believe it's the early Corona spy satellites, they had film packs that were shaped like acorns that these satellites would drop after they transited Soviet airspace. In orbit. And if that drop is the military would come in, they would declare something called a national defense area, an NDA, kick everybody out. They would recover whatever it was, take it out, and then just collapse the NDA. And it's like it never happened. So same thing like if you have a classified aircraft crash, is they'll declare an NDA, pick up all the debris, and then like it never happened.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking. It started in the 1940s with Roswell. It's like, weather balloon. Then they let some story get out that maybe it's a UFO and let everyone run with that, when really it was likely a classified.
Project Mogul.
Yeah. Okay. I just thought you were the perfect guy to ask that question, and you're really spot on with your answer, because you were involved in the counter intel was your was your training and your background.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll bring you back on as the modern UFO disclosure stuff develops.
Please.
And get your insight.
I want it to be. I want it to be true.
So do I.
I really do. But I think 95% of the stuff that people see are probably undisclosed airframes.
Mm-hmm.
I think 5% of it is probably misidentification, and then you have maybe another 5% that are really the mysterious case, and that kind of falls into what Hynek's assessment was. It's probably 3 to 5% that are truly anomalous.
Yeah. Very cool. So that's Mike leaning in there. Yeah, very cool, Trey. We're really excited about the movie.
Mm-hmm.
We'll have to discuss when we want to get this episode out, because I kind of want to time it with the release of your movie now. And we're a few weeks pushed out from interviews. Like, I think.
Right.
So we'll figure something out with Brittany. Brittany's already thinking about that, I'm sure. Yeah, Brittany literally just clicked done already.
Okay.
She's already adjusted our calendar so we can do that in timing with the movie release, because that's better, right?
Well, and also the movie release, you also have the release of my second book, Return to the Meadow.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, my book. This is pure mercenary on me. The Meadow Project, which are my first and second books, and that really goes into depth on the stuff that you might see in the film, and it really adds a lot of depth to it. In the book, the books always go into a lot more detail, but in the books, I've got like transcripts where the lady says, I was grabbed by my feet. I've got like the whole hypnotic regression transcript of that hypnotic regression, and a lot of cool stuff like that. So
very cool. And do they release on the same day?
No, the both books are out.
Okay, both books are out.
Yeah.
Got it. And then, all right, very cool. Is there anything else you wanted to share about the book, or credit anyone in your team or anything before we wrap this up?
Yeah, I just want to thank the whole Anonymous Studies and Observation Group team. They're they're really dedicated professionals. Like I said, some of them aren't with us anymore. Now are there ailments due to the research we've done? I can't say, but they put themselves out there, at great risk. So I really appreciate my team. I appreciate my publisher, Ryan Skinner. And I would like to thank the whole crew out there at Merkle Media and Dark Holler Studios. But most importantly, what I want to tell people is don't live vicariously through things like this book and this movie. Go out and find your own mysteries. Mm-hmm. Peel back the veneer and take that bold step into high strangeness, and your life will never be the same.
Love it. Great way to end it.
That's excellent advice. Thank you for your time and for your insight. We found it enlightening.
Thank you, Trey. We'll talk to you again soon.
Thank you for having me, guys.